Welcome to Design Build Institute of America's Design Build Delivers podcast. I'm Kim Wright with DBIA in Washington. It's award season here at DBIA, and our jury of industry experts have spent 2 full days here in DC judging some of the nation's best design build projects in every sector and region in the country. Each year, the projects and teams inspire and impress us. It's no surprise our industry is changing the way America builds. Today, we're talking to the chair of DBIA's awards jury, Barbara Jackson from the University of Denver, and longtime juror Ron Lansky with the Penta Building Group in Nevada, about what it takes to win a DBIA National Design Build Award. We're talking to Barbara Jackson and Ron Lansky. We're going to talk about the DBIA Awards. We do this every year. It's actually one of my favorite events to sit and watch, because you would be stunned to find out how many great projects are out there and how energized this particular jury is when they spend 2 days going through all of them. So let's start big picture. Why do you think it's important that DBIA honors design build projects? Why even do it?
Well, one of the things I would say is, number one, it's an opportunity for the companies and the individual teams and the clients and everyone to actually bring together. In other words, it's almost like a debrief for a team. You know, they've gone through all these efforts. They may or may not have had great success, but presuming they've had great success, they've been challenged to no end throughout that whole process. But in the end, they're high-fiving, and that can be the end of the story, or that can be the beginning of a recognition of everything they went through. So in order to, when we have these awards programs, it's a way for them to kind of bring that all together, to memorialize it, if you will, in a proposal or a submission for an award. And there it is. It's there for everybody to see. It's also there for them to just, again, use for their own marketing purposes, their own promotion, but really just to recognize, look what we did. And that's what it is. Most of us in this business, you know, this is not a job where we're just pushing paper around, for example. When I drive down the street, I can point to a building here or there, and to my grandson or to my children when they were younger, I could say, your mom built that, or your grandma now built that. But the point is, who gets to do that? So this is just another way that we can memorialize the work we do every day. And I say it every day in my classes, nothing exists without us. There is no transportation, there is no energy, there is no housing, there is no healthcare, there is no education. None of that exists without us. So an awards program like this not only memorializes the project, but it memorializes that set of relationships, colleagues, and people who've come together to pull this all, and they've all been through the challenges.
Right.
But boy, oh boy, they came out the other side, and look what we did. So that's pretty extraordinary. Not everybody else gets to do that.
No. And the industry, you know, it shows the industry what's happening in their own business, too.
There too, design build, although it's been around for quite a while, there's still segments of the country where it's not used very much, and then there's certain segments within market sectors where owners are very unfamiliar. So as a delivery method, that works for many, maybe not all, but the awards allows us to highlight the process as well as a different delivery method. So it's not just memorializing the team, but it's also a little bit of an educational opportunity for those of us in the business to kind of share that word and get a little excitement out there amongst owners, architects, contractors to say, well, maybe there's something to this. The memorialization of the relationship, though, this is a relationship-based delivery method. And so when we have the opportunity, one of the things that really shines is when we see applications that answer all the questions and give narratives that are descriptive versus another team who answers all the questions and gives a narrative that tells a story. And when we see a story that exemplifies relationships, that's when you know something really special happened with this team, the owner and or the community. We've had projects where even just the community involvement with the design, builder, owner, and community all come together, and it's a very unique opportunity to highlight that through the awards.
And I think that's what people may mistake when if they haven't really seen some of our award winners. These aren't just beautiful buildings. I mean, beautiful buildings are great, and fancy highways or whatever, but it really does go much deeper because we're talking about awards too that deal on process, teaming, design. Tell me a little bit about why do that? Why pull those functions out specifically and say this team, really did great at process, let's say?
Well, again, taken all together, this is what it's intended to be. It's not intended to be a segregated services model. Design build is an integrated services model, and understanding that each component, the process, the design excellence, all of that taken together is really, really important. That's how we get an optimized integrated solution. It doesn't happen in isolation or silos. It happens by the engagement of the team. The way I like to say it is that, when you've got a multidisciplinary team to begin with and they go to work on a project, it's not like any one party has the answer. They literally discover the solution and then they optimize that solution through the design build process. They're seeking design excellence. They're seeking constructability. They're seeking meeting budgets and schedules. They're trying to do that all together. And rather than do it in this, again, isolated, linear fashion, they're doing it very much so in a fully engaged model. And again, these projects and these teams, that's what it highlights. And if you don't understand that process, or like Ron said, if you haven't worked under that model, you don't get this. You haven't had the opportunity to work this way. I've actually spoken to some people who've done design build for the first time, and they've done design build right. They had an owner and a leadership team who really knew how to do this, and they come off these projects, and this is what they say: I'm now spoiled for life because I got to experience doing this business in such a way that we were able to create something, develop something, construct something that otherwise could not have been done another way. We couldn't have done it any other way. And again, if you've not experienced that, it's unbelievable when you do. And that's why I think that the projects keep getting a little better, the teams keep getting a little better, because once you experience it, you want to do it again and again and again and improve it some more. And the whole thing is about creating solutions, discovering solutions. And that's what they begin to do. So whatever the fundamental bar was initially to reach, that's now expanding.
Because you've been doing this for years, so you guys have seen this.
And to Barb's point too, you're telling about that experience of somebody maybe for the first time. I mean, it's an absolute paradigm shift. Somebody's seen a delivery method that's very different from the traditional. And if we go back 100 years, or even less, even architects like Frank Lloyd Wright considered themselves the master builder. The architect was the master builder. May have not been physically digging ditches, but the center of the circus was design-based, and then it got built. And then design, bid, build, and what this process has allowed for is a shift. However, that's a delivery, design, bid, build is a delivery method that had been around for generations and taught that way too. So what we're starting to see now is not only the expansion of design build as a delivery method amongst the professionals, but now finally you're starting to see it taught at the higher education levels. Even in my lifetime in schools of architecture, this was never discussed. was
Verboten? Was it?
absolutely. You started with design, and then you got a contractor involved, or they bid it. So it's interesting. There are still some schools that are taught in a very traditional way, where the center of the universe is the design side. But more and more, there are programs that continue to highlight different ways of delivering. So, and a lot of that comes from construction management programs that have evolved. And now we have schools that are starting to incorporate both components, or even, in your case, a third component, the development side.
So we're talking about design builders who have evolved as teams and the whole, and you're seeing that in the awards then too. You're seeing processes that have evolved.
Yeah, and the this is the thing that's fascinating. When several of us have been on the jury for a number of years, so we remember when remember when the whole notion of co-location, for example, when we would see somebody submit that in their packet and identify under the teaming section, they'd identify that they co-located. We would all get excited because golly, that's like the first time we've seen that. We propose it, we make it a best practice, we do all those things, but look they actually did it. Well, now that's kind of the standard, that if you're not co-located, that's the anomaly now. So what we're seeing is actually an expansion of that. So they're looking and finding new ways to engage the client, to engage their subcontractors, to engage their trade partners, to engage those parties they need to engage. So the co-location is even expanding. And what's happening, recently we saw this notion of rotating co-location. And I went, oh my goodness, what is that? So not only did the contractor move into the architect's office at the earliest stages of design, but through the design process, the entire team then co-located to a sub-consultant's office for a period of time. And then they move to the next sub-consultants. And then they came back around to this one. And then it's like, oh my goodness, they're taking it to a next level. But the intention from day one, from the time they come together, is how can we develop integrated solutions? And the only way to do it is to make sure we have access and understanding for what it takes to actually think through this design. Like I say, it's no longer like people are designing in isolation and then bringing the plans or the design to the table and then somebody redlines it and sends it back anymore. They're thinking together out loud as they go through the design process. So again, this is just one best practice that we went from, we were surprised when we first saw it, and now it's kind of like an expectation that you would co-locate, and now they've taken it to the next level. And that's, for example, what we saw this year. We're beginning to see new iterations of higher engagement, of how to team, of how to engage, of how to participate differently in the design process. So, and they're bringing on different team members. I mean, I saw one this year where they're bringing on what they call cultural experts in the facility, for example, that might require a different perspective of understanding for that particular environment or that particular client. And so it's like, these aren't architects and contractors and subcontractors. These are experts in everything from sociology to cultural environments to perhaps sustainability. But again, that may not be a surprise, but some of them are a surprise. It's like, oh my goodness, look who they brought on the team.
And you didn't read that in any design, build, done right pamphlet. That's something that the team decided was the best way to get the job done.
To do that, yeah. And I think too, relative to why even do the awards, back to that, tying into how these teams are getting innovative. It's also about telling the story of how the team got there. And as an organization, DBIA, you realize as people submit and continue to go for these opportunities for awards, the standard of of how they tell their story the bar keeps going up there as well. We've been very quick to now identify a well filled out application that has all the boxes checked and a marketing component versus depth of understanding what it really means to all the stakeholders.
Because it's not just the cost, the schedule, the square footage that we've gotten beyond
Those
that.
are givens.
That's kind of the minimum standard. That's what we're getting at. So they've moved beyond just checking the boxes. And you can tell. I mean, you can tell because when they can convey an enthusiasm, a passion, and a deep understanding, and then innovation associated with any of that and all parts of it, this team really kind of gets it. They've not just figured out the best practices and how to do them. This is no longer about the doing. This is who they're being as teammates. This is who they're being with the client. This is a whole different arena, if you will, that they're beginning to play. And this year in particular, and I made several comments of it to the jury, I said, I am seeing something in these teaming engagements right from day one. There's an intentionality about teaming with real purpose, that they're taking so much more time to understand what the client is actually trying to achieve, like their purpose, much more than how many square feet do you want, how many floors, this building will be, what are the finishes. That is like, again, a given. That's not what these teams are doing anymore. These teams are doing a deep, deep dive into getting an understanding of what this client is up to really. Because it's not about the concrete or the steel. It's about, what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to, design and build hospitals where the infection rates get reduced? And why is that important in the first place? And what impact does that have on the family? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where they're starting now. That's where they're starting.
Years ago, when we first met, years and years ago, we, in one of our first conversations, we talked about teams that get it or they don't get it. And what one of our inside jokes is, if I have to explain to you what it is, we have a problem with the team to begin with. And the problem is, teaching it is not a linear, check the box, now you learned this, we'll go on to this. So the evolution of design build as a delivery method and within our industry, it starts to feed on itself. I think one of the reasons we're seeing better quality is teams are starting to get it. This undefined thing of, okay, you got it. And they're taking it to the next level because they've had that shift of saying, you can almost see the light bulb. In some of the owners' letters or in some of the narratives, you'll see stories about, we started working with an owner who was not a proponent of design build and now says they will never deliver another project a different way. That light bulb, that paradigm shift, and getting it is what happened somewhere in that process.
Every year I've been involved, I have seen an elevation of the understanding of the potential of this process, that it is moving further and further and further away from, again, the materials and the equipment and the budgets and the schedules. That's a give. That has to be there. But what we're moving into is truly deep problem solving. This is what I call, we're moving closer and closer to what I call challenge-driven design build, because these clients have a challenge, but what they've asked for is a building, in some cases a road or a bridge. But the point is, they're now seeing that not only they have the ability to deliver more than the bridge or the building, but the clients are beginning to see, my goodness, look how much more we're getting. And that's when you get a letter that says, I can't believe what happened here.
You know what I'm really looking forward to is, as this next generation who's being taught some of these principles, as they continue to move into the workplace, we're going to see a wave that's going to take it to a whole nother level. The other thing that I really get excited about, once in a while we'll get a submittal of a team that has never done design, but any of them have never done design build. And frankly, maybe there's not even anybody who's DBIA certified on the team. And you read it and they get it. They've already got the fundamental principles of what this relationship is about. Take that team and now have them do 2 or 3 more with some education and some training on top of that. I think we're going to see I think every year we've been seeing steps. Every year it's a little bit better. I don't know when it's coming, but I think there's going to be a jump at some point.
Just an explosion of that exponential learning.
Absolutely.
Taking off.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, talking about the challenge-driven design build, that hits me as the common thread that helps explain how it is that you guys can sit down and look at every sector, every size project, completely different goals, costs. The diversity in the projects that are sent in every year are incredible. How do you compare a small bridge with a humongous college campus building?
We had an interesting situation last year. One of the teams in transportation, when they went off to their room, said, boy, there were 2 jurors. And they said, boy, we kind of came to the same conclusion, but there's something that doesn't ring right about this. Could you take a look at it? Meaning somebody not having any experience in that market sector. And we did that last year. So it was basically a blind juror to that market sector. And it was a different point system, but the new juror to that market sector scored within 2 points.
Interesting.
Because it really boils down, and that's why you'll see that voting for the project of the year. They're not looking at
my sector.
They're looking at A through Z. Did they go through the process, and what was the teaming and all the criteria? But that was an interesting exercise last year. And I think they brought it to you and I, if I recall. But you're also a little nervous because you're thinking, I don't know anything about this market sector. Could possibly be way off the mark, and not so much because of all that criteria that makes sense regardless of the size of the project.
Good design build is good design build.
Good, yeah.
It means that if you stay within that band of best practices, then you have an opportunity to deliver a really good project, and the nuances won't get in the way of doing that. If anything, you'll hone those best practices, hone those best practices to actually, again, apply to any one of those nuances as well. And that's our starting point. I mean, that's how we look at these projects. And so, I mean, we literally, we're at a point now where, everybody's sort of in that band. Anybody who submits, they're pretty much in that band. And now we're moving from, good performance to extraordinary performance. So who's rising to the top of this are those teams and those projects where they took those best practices, they started to develop them even further, and quite frankly, they're starting to inform us of where to go next in terms of the best practices and what's coming and how to do this even better and better and better. So we're almost now in this relationship where, of course, we're watching to understand that everyone gets design build and they've been educated in it, they might be certified, right? But now what's happening is they're beginning to feed us back where to go in the next level. And the other thing I wanted to mention, again, this time in particular, is a common theme of how the industry itself and these projects and these teams are beginning to speak a great deal about how important it is that the team and the client be educated in design build. I saw that over and over again this time, where they spoke as, before we even started, we made sure that everyone was up to speed and educated in design build. That's the client, that's the subcontractors. So they're starting to realize how important that is.
And that's an important shift in order to improve the likelihood of success.
It's a very important shift. And it's, again, I can't remember reading a bunch of that last year. It's like submission after submission after submission. And they spent time on how they did that, how they got people up to speed, how they brought them along, how they used education, your design build education, as a criteria as to whether they were going to put you on the team or not. There was a time when I said, how do you pick the people to be on your team? And the answer was, well, whoever's available, that's who gets on the team. They were actually saying, we interviewed people. We evaluated how much education they had in design build, and if not much, how we were going to get them educated and up to speed before they were on this team.
Wow.
Go figure.
Right.
You know?
When did that happen?
When did that happen? You know, we've only, here at Design DBIA, we've only been educating people in design build for 25 years. And now it's like, oh,
but we see it too.
This
so
has
it's
value.
True. Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely the case, and you wonder, it has to all be feeding each other, right? They're educating themselves, they're building educated teams, they're delivering better projects, they're evolving.
Starts feeding on itself.
Yeah. How exciting is that? Which is why you guys are willing to sit, stuck in a conference room for 2 days, pouring through hundreds of pages of applications.
So, there's everybody's busy, and the economy's hot, and construction and design construction it's a good business right now. And during the course of the year, there are a number of times where you have to adjust your calendar to project deadlines change, priorities change, business plans change. Calendar management for a lot of people, because everyone is so busy, is quite difficult. There's one thing that's not difficult in my calendar, is once these dates are set for this jury, it would take an awful lot for me to say, I can't make it.
Why is that?
Because for me personally, this is it's a lot of passion. It's therapeutic. It's exciting. It gives me an opportunity to take my brain outside the normal box. And you're sitting with a group of people that are, for the sake of making the process and the delivery method better, are all in there for the exact same reason. Let's make this better. Let's improve on it. And it's just exciting when you get to go do that. It's an honor and a privilege to get to come and do this.
And this is a lively group.
Yeah, it's a lively group. It's a group of experts, quite frankly. They know this. They know this stuff. They know it well. But again, what's here is, when I first started, I didn't know if people were just going to go through the motions. The serious work that takes place here is unbelievable. We start days before we get here. And it takes me almost an hour to review each packet. So, and I write notes, and everybody does. It's not just me, but I am so impressed by the amount of work that people put into this. And our debates can get pretty lively.
Yes,
and
they can.
We have good debates, serious debates. In the end, there's such a respect among the jury members for one another.
We have really good listeners and people willing to say, I already don't agree with you, but I'm going to listen. And we've seen opinions shift to 180 degrees.
Which is pretty unusual if you think about it. Everybody think they know what they know, right?
They listen to learn. People are listening to one another to learn, to understand a different perspective. And that's what I mean. This is unique because this isn't a small group. This is a fairly large group of folks in terms of numbers. And that they can do that. We do it for 2 days solid. This is what we're doing. We do some in small groups and some in the bigger groups. I mean, we have a little more than a half a day of open debate and open discussion on these projects. And we really get into the weeds of some of it, but there's no rock left unturned when we get done analyzing this. And again, each one, there's going to be different perspectives. But once we hear it all, and we're getting to hear it all, and people listen, then we make decisions. And you don't get to do that all the time. You can't even do that with two other people sometimes.
Day one, when I get here in the morning, I'm excited, but I know it's in the weeds, hard work. You've got to be focused. You've got to be intent on getting through the quantity that you need to get through. That's with homework done in advance. But the morning of the second day, I get up and I just can't wait to get here because I know what's going to happen in this day. It's going to be out-of-the-box discussions, thinking, debate, persuasion, education, and day two of the jury is the day I can't get here. Let's get this going and you never know what's going to surface, but something always surfaces, and it's never, the most serious conversations are never about, it's never about a mechanical thing or a check the box thing. It's about something usually to do with integrity, intent, relationship, value, respect, the greater cause, the
bigger
community,
picture,
the bigger picture. And those conversations, you just, to be able to participate and be involved with that's really exciting. It's fun stuff. So many owners too have a preconceived notion as to what an architect is or what a contractor is or the perceived opinions of those professions. When you see a team come together, that's when you'll get owners who will have that change in it. Wow, there's something to this. And then when that grows into why is this building being built? And then it's the users and the visitors to that space and the community to that space. We had a project last year that was really stunning. It not only was inclusive to incorporating subcontractors from the region, but the region wasn't just a metropolitan area. It was a 5-mile radius to the project. And there were commentaries in the narratives about subcontractors being excited about working on the project because they knew when the project was done, they as a community member were going to get to use that space. So they had a vested interest, whoever that subcontractor was, he or she, doesn't matter, tile, drywall, concrete, but you had active community members knowing, oh, this is for my family.
Right. This is not just community. A building.
Yeah.
This is
that's fun when you can see that.
Yeah.
So for those project teams that have been sitting on the sidelines thinking you can't make me fill out that 40-page or application or whatever it is, who just have been hesitant to participate, what would you say to get them in there and let us see what they're doing?
Well, I think where I'd start with that or try to encourage them is to understand that, again, to document beyond you just went through something. You might have spent 6 months, you might have spent a year and a half, you might have spent 3 years in this whole process. That notion of memorializing this effort and what it created and all of those relationships, this is one of the issues in construction overall. We do great work prepping for a project. We don't do so good debriefing it after the fact. We don't do so good. And every company I talk to practically says, we need to do that. We need lessons learned and all of this. I would encourage, like if I had a team that had done a project, I would say, why don't we use the awards program, for example? Again, one, to memorialize, but secondly, this would be a great way to actually debrief a project, what worked, what didn't work, to actually use the exercise of submitting to actually flesh out what happened, the good, the bad, the ugly, as you go through the process. And the things we'd really like to see is more and more teams doing that as an exercise as a team versus maybe passing it off to the marketing people
Sure.
or something like that, because it almost would force that challenge to get together and talk about the project. And when you do that, you're going to get to learn from it. You're going to learn. You're going to start to highlight, oh my goodness, look at this. I didn't realize that's what we did. Maybe we should incorporate that on the next job. But this to me is all part of almost the continuous improvement process, in that you have to look at it to make this application. Now, does anybody have the time? That's a whole nother thing. But again, if you want to move from good to great, if you want to excel in this business and be more competitive, but not only more competitive, like leave your competition behind, you got to take some you got to make some effort to actually make those improvements. And to me, compiling all this is a way to do it. It's in the end, that's a teaching instrument. That packet is a teaching instrument for the people you're trying to train up. That's the way I see it.
Thanks to Barbara and Ron for that glimpse into the DBIA Awards world. Our National Merit winners will be announced this summer. Then they'll go on to compete for awards of excellence and the Project of the Year, to be announced at DBIA's annual Conference and Expo November 7th through 9th in New Orleans. Are you ready to enter your project for a 2019 award? You can start that process today by adding your project to the National Design Build database. That's the first step, and you can do that anytime at dbia.org/projects database. So why wait? Get a head start on next year's awards process, while also getting national attention year-round by adding your project to our database.